he has built for himself, for what remains of his life. A grave as beautiful as epiphanies, he calls it, rooms to sleep.
We just heard author and activist Anish Gawande recite a few lines by the late gay AMU professor Srinivasa Ramchandra Siras. Many of us wouldn't have forgotten Siras, who was ostracized and suspended from the university just for being gay. You would also remember Manoj Bajpayee's portrayal of him in the legendary film Aligarh. Today we are talking to Anish for a very special reason. He recently translated 4 of Siras's poems from Marathi to English. He's going to tell us all about that journey.
I was re-watching Aligarh yesterday because I knew that I'm going to talk to you today. So, there was this one instance where Rajkumar Rao's character talks to Manoj Bajpayee about this particular book, The Grass Beneath Me.
Grass beneath my feet. So Paya Khali Hirwal is often translated as grass beneath my feet. I translate this as verdure under my feet, which is more a sort of undistinguishable greenery. But yes.
I was curious about how this one instance, how did it get stuck so much that, you went on a journey to find out more about the book, actually uncover it, read the poems and translate one of the poems in that book?
What started off in the movie, and as you rightly pointed out, was the fact that the poem occupies and the poetry collection occupies a very tiny sliver of the narrative, right? And for me, looking at Aligarh, the film, and looking at the sort of legacy that Siras left behind, one major chunk that was missing was a celebration of Siras's work. That all the newspaper headlines, all the TV coverage, all the sort of masala around the scandal had focused on the story of pathos of a professor who had been sort of abandoned by his own university, a professor who'd faced stigma, who'd faced ostracization, despite the fact, remember, that Section 377 had been struck down just a year before this incident by the Delhi High Court. It had been decriminalized in a move that was celebrated as a victory for queer rights. And in the context of all of this came Siras, who reminded us that change in laws don't mean change in public perception, and tragically lost his life to homophobia, right? And for me, it's important to commemorate Siras as one of those individuals who we let down as a society, who we let down as a community. But it also became important for me to not just stereotypically, archetypically put Siras into this book of a martyr, right? That somebody who's only remembered for the fact that he died, but rather somebody who we celebrate with joy, we celebrate with love, and whose legacy we honor. So it began as a wild goose chase to see that I want to know more about Siras. I want to know more beyond the headlines. I want to know more beyond this sort of scandalous story that the media had picked up. I want to know about Siras, the person.
In which year did you watch the film?
It's a very good question. I watched it a year after it came out. So I don't really remember what year Aligarh came out, a year or 2 years after it came out. I didn't watch it in the theaters. I watched it online or through a DVD, and I remember it being like a very random movie that I watched. I'd actually not even known that it was about this sort of queer professor. I hadn't watched it as a queer movie, but obviously it hit hard.
When did you start the actual search for the book? What's the timeline of it?
This is one of those journeys that sort of lay at the back of your mind always. So it was never I wouldn't say it was a search that drove me to the extreme, or that I went and did everything that I possibly could to find the book. But it was this jhatka that kept going and coming back, that, I must find this book, and then became an obstinate, mad, passionate search. And then it sort of faded away into memory after it failed. But I would say around 4 years ago is when I started off this search for the book, when I was still at university. And my first go-to was to see if any libraries had it. And so I started doing a search about do any libraries in any part of the country have it. And then there is this sort of Sahitya Mandal in Pune that had awarded Siras for this work that I called up and asked, do you have a copy of the book? And now they're a very old, traditional establishments. They were like, if you want to find it, you're going to have to come to Pune and search for it. Like, we don't know if we have it. It might be somewhere in these bookshelves. And that trip never really happened for a variety of reasons. And along the way, a sort of assembly of interesting people got pulled into the mix. There were Apurva Astani, who worked on the film, who I sort of DM'd on Twitter, and I said, listen, like, do you have a copy of this goddamn book? And he's like, somebody had it on the set somewhere, but I can't really remember who. That conversation fell through. There's Deepu Sebastian, who is the character that Rajkumar Rao plays in that movie. Deepu never met Siras in real life, actually. That's a sort of a dramatic retelling, but has Deepu for help, but that also didn't go anywhere. And finally, I was on this wild goose chase when I found another person who was also passionately searching for this book, which was Akhil Katya, who is the editor of the anthology along with Aditi Angiras, the anthology The World That Belongs to Us, which my translation of Siras's poem finds one small mention in and one becomes one small part of. And Akhil is the one who, I think a little over a year ago, in 2018 actually, found an ebook copy on this website called Book Ganga of Siras's work.
Okay.
And that's when I started reading the work, and I knew at the back of my mind that I wanted to translate it. I knew at the back of my mind that I wanted to do something. But the real push came when this anthology was being planned, and Akhil sort of reached out and said, Anish, will you translate Siras's poem? And I said, I've never done translation before. You want me to translate it from book? And he said yes. And there began that journey of translating that book, of which around 4 poems are now translated, and the translation of the one poem that makes it to the anthology, which is Hopaicha Kolya, or Rooms to Sleep In, that I'm very proud of today.
Throughout this journey to actually get a copy of this book, what is something new that you got to learn about Siras?
For me, the journey itself was a revelation in how little we have documented of queer histories, right? I think it was a reminder of the fact that despite the sort of widespread discussion around queerness that we see in certain platforms, today queerness remains largely invisible across the board. I think after that, what was lovely was finding some beautiful works penned by his friends, penned by his colleagues at Aligarh Muslim University, and the love and the sort of warmth that Siras was remembered by and with. And I think that was quite lovely throughout this journey. And as somebody who was in 2010, how old must I have been? 14? Less than. Younger than that. So I have no recollection of having heard of this incident at all or knowing anything about Siras's life or his passing. And it began as a process of excavation when suddenly I was seeing newspaper reports and obsessively going on YouTube and stalking NDTV footage from those many years ago and seeing all the interviews that he gave before he passed and when the scandal was brewing. And so it was a sort of excavation.
In these 4 years, did you ever get to go to the AMU campus?
I did not.
Okay.
This is something that I really, really want to do, but it just did not happen. And like I said, it's serendipitous, right? Like these are journeys that sort of they're textured and they sort of move in and out of memory, move in and out of consciousness. And I didn't get to go to AMU. I actually was in touch with a few people from AMU. I was supposed to go there. But it never really happened for a variety.
Probably, after you actually get a physical copy of the book, maybe you can take the book and go to AMU and read it there.
For me, it was really important to also go to AMU because most probably the library at AMU will have the book. Because Siras was a professor of Marathi at AMU, so I'm sure the Marathi collection is not impossible to dig through. So it seems quite possible and plausible that there is a copy of that book that exists there.
Have you ever thought that, what if Professor Siras was alive on 6th of September 2018 when the Supreme Court decriminalized Section 377. Have you ever thought how would he have reacted?
Siras would have laughed. If he had survived what happened at AMU, if he had survived the humiliation that followed, he would have laughed and he would have been a powerful voice in this sort of lock, stock and barrel acceptance that the courts can deliver any form of justice. Because remember again, right, that Siras dies after a progressive High Court verdict. Siras knows that court verdicts mean nothing. Siras knows that in this country today, with 377 off the books, you can still be fired for being gay. You can still be denied access to a restaurant for being queer. You can still be discriminated against in education and called homophobic or transphobic slurs without any action being taken against the person doing that to you, because we don't have an anti-discrimination law. What have we done after 377 got struck down? What does that victory mean? What does that verdict mean? And Siras' life questions that.
The book is up for sale on Amazon.
Yes, the book is up for sale on Amazon, also at your local booksellers. Support your local booksellers. I don't know where most of your audience is from. I get my Delhi books from Bari Sons. I get my Bombay books from Kitab Khana. The rest of you in different parts of the world know where your local booksellers are. COVID-19 has hit them hard. Please go support them. Buy your books from local booksellers.
Thank you so much for joining us, Anish. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Parvathi, for bearing with me. And thank you for telling me so early that this is going to be a video interview, and seeing all these locks of hair that look like I am a mad artist sitting somewhere on a hilltop, ungroomed and unkempt. But it's been very fun.
But you still look good, so, you know.
Oh, chalo, I just hope so. Very lovely chatting with you.
Do feel free to like, share and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.